everybody is creative, otherwise you wouldn't be a human being. We are co-creators. And once you get that, whatever medium you choose to work with, to train yourself, to find your inner resources, to meet the outside world, that is the medium you're going to be using to develop. At the moment, mine was colour. At the moment, mine is the printed word.
Let's talk communication. Today with Noy Pullen. Welcome to Let's Talk Communication with me, Telana Simpson. I had a wonderful, thought-provoking discussion with Noy Pullen, sitting by her fire on a chilly day in Cape Town. You'll hear the fire cracking in the background as we talk about how to communicate consciously and how we can develop this capacity by being aware of how we consume the media today.
So, of course, this is for me the opposite way around of the way I normally work, because I'm usually asking people questions.
It is, and so thank you, Noy, for giving of your time and inviting me here so that we could have this conversation. And as you say, turn the table.
Yes.
So maybe just to start off with, could you tell us a bit about your story and what led you to be in the role you're in now, where you're so fascinated with the written word?
Well, I think I've always realized that the written word opens a door to the world of imagination. I discovered that when I was about 7 or 8, when I could read Enid Blyton, and the whole universe opened up for me, and I've never forgotten that magic moment where these black squiggles just turned into a magic world.
And that led you then to part of your career as being in journalism. Is that right?
Yeah, I've always written, and I've always written plays and stories, and I've written letters, many correspondence. And then I decided to explore colour, so I wrote a book on colour called Colour Magic, Your Piece of the Rainbow. And then after that, the head of Diabetes South Africa actually asked me whether I would write for them. So I then did an in-depth course with Marion Scher, and so since then I've been writing for periodicals as well. But the media, whatever media we're dealing with, is actually I to you. And to me, that is, whether it's in the spoken word or in an advert or a picture or the written word, it's a way of communicating, and a considered way of communicating, because you've usually, shall I say, censored yourself in a certain sense, so you're offering something a little more considered than just an off-the-cuff conversation or an argument, for example. So all of those to me are the media, because I am a medium of the word and you are a medium of the word, and so we meet.
And then we have a considered conversation.
Yes, when it's written, then it's more considered than just a conversation, because once I've said something, I can't take it back. But if I write something and I sleep on it, and I can, for example, if I'm going to write minutes, I usually go through them at least 3 times, because hidden agendas must be removed completely. But of course, if you're writing a love letter, it's the opposite. So you actually want to put in as much feeling as you possibly can. So it all depends on your motive, and it depends on who or what is inspiring you to make this communication. You know, you might want to manipulate somebody, you might want to cause a sensation by being popular and, writing something outlandish, or you may really want to honor someone else and put yourself in the background and let them shine. It just depends on who motivates you, because I think we're always motivated by some force which inspires us to do one thing or another with the printed word.
Mm. So that's where I wanted to really speak to you about today was about the written word, but in terms of the media. And for me, when I speak about media, I'm thinking of newspapers, the news on TV, magazines, the internet, everything that's written on there. So with that was just really reflecting on how involved the media is in our society today. I mean, it influences us all the time in the world and in the society. So just to get further some of your thoughts on how you see the media actually influencing us.
Well, I think behind every article there is obviously a writer, and he's being inspired either by his editor, or the newspaper or the magazine or the show, the TV show, whatever it is. And so they have an agenda, and they put forward their opinion, their agenda, they wish to persuade. In most of the time, it's about persuasion, manipulation, whether it be in the form of wanting something or being scared. I believe that there are forces that actually are behind absolutely anything and everything that is done by the human being. And writing is certainly a very potent one. Ever since the printing press, we have had, the word is being made public, people have learned to read, and now we all now have access to being able to publish as well. And I'm not sure whether everyone appreciates. Certainly we've had young people their careers being ruined by silly things that they've actually printed, and then they can't get rid of them. So one really needs to honor the power of the printed word and make sure it's like a loaded gun. You really have to make sure that you are using it for the reason that you wish to share or influence or honor. How it just depends on your motivation, because that's going to shine through. And the reader could become a consumer and simply gather absolutely everything that he possibly can or she can by just paging through the newspaper every single day, and then it's tomorrow's fish and chips wrapping or parrot caged.
Parrot cage lining, like my parrots, yes.
But some articles you don't do that to. You actually tear them out and keep them because they're inspiring. So what is the difference between the throwaway words and the words that you don't put on the bottom of the parrot cage? There's a difference, and how do we judge that? That's more what I'm working with, is, can I become discerning? Can I recognize the being behind the words? Do I know what he's trying to do to me? Can I share his world? Or does he simply want me to be scared? Does he want me to do something? Or is he really offering his creative powers for me to enjoy and to be inspired by? It's, to me, that's the whole realm of the media.
But the way you're describing it now is a much more conscious approach when consuming media. Is trying to understand, as you say, the being behind it and what his or her intentions are for us.
Yes.
So maybe you mentioned a bit about your work. So I know you're working now, you're doing some research in this field. I don't know if it's worth just sharing a bit about your research, just because I think it helps set the context
Yes.
of.
Well, I've decided to take a subscription to the City Press newspaper. I've chosen it for specific reasons, that I find it balanced. I don't detect a particular force behind the editor. I've looked at the editor, Ferial Haffajee, for a long time, and I find her really respectable writer, respectable journalist, and she's also written books. And so what I do is I give myself an exercise to do. What I could do is I could read through the newspaper and see, well, what is the emphasis here? Is it very much on money? Is it very much on crime? What is the balance that, in this newspaper at the moment? Or I could take one particular journalist's article, or I could take one theme, or one, let's say, a happening that everyone's heard about in the week, and then I would see how do various journalists handle the same subject. But I choose the exercise. In other words, I use the media now as a means of exercising my own faculties of observation, discernment, and detection. I want to know what's happening, how are they employing the word, what are they trying to get me to do, how are they reporting, and at the bottom of that is I'm hoping is going to train my own sense of judgment as to whether something is truthful, or is manipulative, or is fear-mongering. In other words, I'm trying to discern whether something is worth reading. And the thing is, you can only do that once you've read it. But if you practice that, then at least I am convinced that I'm training a faculty of discernment in myself. You could do it through cooking, wine tasting, dressmaking. You can do it through any medium. They're all media, and mine is at the moment is the printed word, because it is, there's also the sentence in the beginning was the word. So how important is the word? How important is communication, being able to speak to each other? And are we honoring that gift, or are we using it and manipulating it? It goes down it's as existential as that for me.
Because I think it's a nice tie into the other part of this conversation was about consciousness evolution, as I call it. I'm fascinated by how we are waking up as humans, or not waking up. And you're saying like part of your exercise with the written word is that developing your own inner faculty of discernment. So I suppose my question is just about, for you, like, what are your thoughts on consciousness and how it relates to us needing to work on our own development, developing our own abilities, if I can call it that for now.
Yeah. I think part of that conversation that you're bringing up is moving from the tribe, the clan, the nation, the group, the church, whatever it is, to the individual. And I think, I would never have asked my mother, "Who are you?" She would have wondered, where do you come? What does that mean?
What question, yeah.
That is not a question. If you asked me, "What do you do?" then my father would have been able to answer that. But he would never have, we would never have asked him, "Who are you?" It's a kind of new question. to ask someone who they are. And young people, you don't ask them what they do, because most of them don't do. We're implying there that what work do you do? And a lot of them are not doing that, so that they can't be identified by their work anymore. They actually are a me, and you're a you, and who are you and who am I? And that's, to me, a new question. I don't think we've ever had that in the past. We've been governed, I think, if you look at King Lear, you will find, I think it was Edmund who was basically he was an illegitimate character, so he had no bloodline, so he had no culture to fall back on, and he did the most dreadful things in that play because he could. And we've now moving from right and wrong, good and bad, good and evil, where people know this is done and that's not done, this is right and that's wrong. That, I'm not saying that doesn't exist anymore, but to the extent that somebody makes his own decisions, he's moved from this group cultural, this kind of attitude, to I take responsibility for what I do. I decide whether it is appropriate or not for this moment. It's not a question of this is good and that's bad. And I think the consciousness has moved from being given norms to actually waking up to discovering the norms of your own truth, your own inner truth. And I think that's a gradual process, and many people, everyone is on that road somewhere. Some are far more conscious, and one could almost call them our leaders. If we take Mandela, Nelson Mandela, for example, he had a 28-year initiation. And before he had that, he was a certain being, and when he came out, he was a completely different being. And you could compare that to another person who hadn't had that kind of incarceration, but who just carried on with his plumbing works or his, teaching or farming. There may not have been such a difference in the actual human being. And it's all individual. It's your individual journey. And the media is part of that journey. The written media expresses the journeys of people in little snippets. So for me, consciousness, you only need to look around you at the people you know. You've got someone who is standing at the robot, unwashed, unshaven, and with a board around his neck. And then you've got someone else who really tries to help everybody else, even though he might not be a wealthy person. And there's just a different consciousness, a different possibility for each of those, and each one has his story. And neither of them is better than the other. They're in a different part of that road of development towards being the archetypal human being who will suffer as long as someone else is suffering. We're there. We're on our way.
Okay, so if we're on our way and we're all developing, on our unique journeys, because you said it's a lot right now in terms of where the world is in the time we live in. It's much more individual. Who am I? Versus, like you were saying about like the generation above you, who's focused on what they do. So we're about who we are. And you spoke a bit about its responsibility. So I suppose I'm trying to ask, and the media is a part of this. So if I wanted to develop my consciousness or develop myself, how could I use the media, or what is the media's role then in helping me be more responsible about my development, because it sounds like what you're using the media for is to develop that the faculty of discernment.
Yeah.
So, you know, how does it all relate in terms of us moving?
Well, it also depends on how you want to spell responsibility, because it's two very different words.
Mm-hmm.
The one is I'm responsible for this mess. The other one is I respond to you. So I would say you could look at both of those, that I have to own where we are. Because I'm part of this time spirit, I'm part of this time realm. I'm not in the ancient Egypt, and I'm not in the Byzantine times, and I'm not in the Reformation. I'm here.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm co-responsible for where we are, but can I respond to the present moment, to the need of the time? And when one looks at the printed media, which is I think what we're working with, you will get very courageous, brave journalists who can share their way, their path, the experiences that they're trying to draw attention to. And for me, it's my work to, first of all, is to really accompany various journalists on their road. One can look at certain journalists who are confrontational, bitter. They've got a reputation to uphold, or they're cynical. You think of the whipping boy, he's always been very cynical. You look at Molly Reinhardt many years ago, you wouldn't remember her, but she was as vicious as you can get, tearing any lady who's at a social event to pieces because of what she's wearing. What is her motive? So it's just using pieces of writing by not analyzing, but by finding out what kind of words are being used. Why would someone use such a word? In other words, through looking at the written word on a daily basis, describing daily events, you can find the ways and means that people have employed, and you start to see the forces living in the world, the forces of progress, and the forces of too fast, too much, glamour, sensationalism, where people love the gossip and they salivate over someone else's misery, for example, and in that I also discover my own possibility of being the worst. I think it was Walt Whitman who said, I am the worst of humanity, but I'm always also the best. So it's to explore the extremes within myself, and that you can do that through the media, because you can also notice that when I see so-and-so falling from grace, I get a certain glee. And I need to recognize the glee that's there, not pretend it's not there. So for me, the media is an extreme, they call it Schadenfreude or something like that, where you take pleasure at someone else's downfall. And if you take Dr. Len from the Hawaiian criminal penitentiary, he healed the inmates by recognizing whatever they had done, recognizing that he had that in him, and clearing it out of himself. And because of that, these people were healed. So, in other words, if I clean out my own inner house can I help the rest of my people and my time in some small way?
And just to say that in other words, because the way I understand that when we say clean out our inner stuff, it's about owning all parts of us. As you said, so it's owning my darkness as much as my light. That I have the ability to do bad as much as the good. And then obviously, so what I'm hearing is that we could use the media then, the news, the newspapers, whatever, as you're reading that, the discernment that you're talking about, the faculty there that we're developing is, as you engage with what it's written, to be more conscious, more aware of what it brings up for us, and to acknowledge that and process that in a way that it transforms into something that is, I don't know what, wholer? Well, I'm more whole if I can own my dark and my light.
You know, my passion is color, as you can see.
Yes, it's very colorful.
And color does not exist without darkness. Color is where dark and light meet. And Isaac Newton said, color is white light, which is not true. He, if you look at the Goethean way that color is has been researched, you will notice that color arises where dark and light meet. So the darkness of your will, which comes from your future, the lightness of your thinking, which comes from your past training, they actually meet in the feeling. And so if you take away your darkness, you've got no feeling, no color. You are then just a talking head. So to me, the darkness is not evil, it's me. It's 1/3 of me. And my light, the lightness up here, is the least reliable until I train it, until I actually allow it to penetrate through the feeling into the will or the darkness, to really see, well, what makes me tick? What makes me who I am? It's all three. And this business of only relying on what people call the good, I don't judge things as good or bad. I judge them by the consequences of what they are. I mean, if somebody writes an article which really is derogatory about another person, I would say that is a pity that had to be written. I would say that was that necessary to write. Could it have been written in a more empathetic or compassionate way, where where, for example, Dr. Len, when he looked at these really dangerous criminal patients, he didn't judge them. He actually worked with the forces that were living there in a real way. And somehow it's got to do with that. It's identifying the forces and seeing if they can be redeemed. I mean, there are some events and some articles possibly that are beyond redemption and are so, or films or adverts, they are just beyond redemption. They really, there are certain adverts that I don't allow myself to look at because I know that I can't face it. So there are certain elements that, that I realize are not safe for me to act, not for my own sanity. So I can gauge how far I can actually penetrate into the dark, because it's scary, it's uncharted territory, and I need to have my own health. I need to understand how much I can take. And so I'm not sure, if I know a lot of journalists are willing and courageous enough to go and interview a murderer, for example. I'm not sure whether I could do that. So I also have to gauge my own capacity for going into the dark, and in the same way, I did philosophy for my degree, but the thing is, there are many philosophers that I haven't got a clue what they're talking about. Even though I managed to pass, they're beyond me, and so in the light, and so there are others beyond me in the dark, and I have to find my own way.
Because that would be where you are in terms of your developments.
Yes.
So it's about, and that's, does it relate then to the discernment? As you're developing your ability to discern what you're engaging with, you also can discern it's too much of a stretch for me for where I am now, so let's rather just keep developing.
I'm not ready for that.
Yes.
I can't face that. I can't cope with that.
So maybe the question is, how would we know when it's just that, when we don't have the capacity yet to go that next step, versus we just don't want to go there because we lazy, or I mean, we just say an excuse, oh, that's too much for me.
Yes, I think, you see, even there, I wouldn't judge someone, because when you have run out of steam, you know, to me, the old, if I may use the word karma, like my group soul, my family, the church, you know, my country, to me that's like a tube of toothpaste. And I keep squeezing it out and putting it on my brush and squeezing it out, but eventually that thing is empty. And that's when I know that I can't go there anymore. I don't get it from my church. I don't get it from my teacher. It's finished. The tube is empty, and I now have to find it in myself. And that is a moment of development. And if you haven't got there, you won't understand it. And if you've got past there, you will allow the person to be in that pain of loss and nothingness. But it's a moment. It's a moment to pass through, and then you start relying more and more and more on your creativity. You know, I know that in churches we are talked about as being creatures, God's creatures. I've realized I'm not a creature. I'm a co-creator. And when you realize that, you have the responsibility, but you also have the joy and the knowledge that all I have to do is become creative. And then I will help to co-create the future. I will help. I can either destroy it or I can help create it. I wonder if I could read you something here. This is by H.Z. Bennett. He wrote this in 1995. I got this from Willie Bento's site. He was someone I knew in America. He was a psychologist. He died recently. And he quoted this one, and it somehow encapsulates what I'm trying to say. We are all seeking greater meaning in our lives, and for many people, creativity represents a kind of golden grail, promising a sense of personal fulfillment and healing that nothing else can. It's got to do with the co-creator in me. Everybody is creative, otherwise you wouldn't be a human being. You know, a bird doesn't create its nest. It builds, it doesn't get a double story this year and, you know, a garden next year. It does it beautifully, but it doesn't create. It works out of instinct. And that is what separates us from all other created beings, is that we are co-creators. And once you get that, whatever medium you choose to work with, to train yourself, to find your inner resources, to meet the outside world, that is the medium you're going to be using to develop. At the moment, mine was color. At the moment, mine is the printed word.
So then if we go then with the printed word then as the medium, for example, when you talk about creating then, so for me, because I was fortunate to do like a workshop with you recently, so I think part of what, if I understand what you're saying, is the creative part is when we can engage with the word and then use our inner resources, our energies, our creative impulse, whatever it is, to work with that. So either transform what we find as a negative or a trigger for us in terms of what we've read and move it into something more positive for us. Or I'm saying positive, it's
Yes.
You know, I mean, it's that, as well as, is it just the creative expression as we started off? Do you know what I mean, in terms of being conscious, thinking about what we want to impart to someone else, and with the intention, creating a document, you know, a story, a article, in order to impart a message.
Yes, I mean, you're also working with a medium of expression, which is probably more interactive rather than in the printed word, where it goes through a completely different medium. But I think it's twofold. The one is learning to communicate in a more authentic way, or assessing who's doing that. If it's another journalist, that would be the one way of doing it. Another one is to recognize the forces that are active in our time, because there's no point in being naive. You know, there are positive, there are progressive forces, there are retrogressive forces. You can find that in your workplace. You can find it absolutely anywhere. You can find it in yourself from day to day. They are the forces within that actually, consciously or unconsciously, move us along every day. You know, if I'm in a car and someone cuts me off, I can rant and rave and, you know, make it a rude gesture. I can swear, I can raise my blood pressure, or I can decide, okay, I wonder what made him be in such a hurry, to just pull myself back as a kind of technique. In other words, instead of being a consumer and just reacting to everything, and talk about, which is always everywhere in the news at the moment, my rights. You know, I'm on the left hand side. That's my right. He had no right to do that. If I have to say, that is one of the worst things for me, is my rights at the moment. It's a very dangerous and destructive term, and one finds it everywhere in the media. And it is a stepping stone from having no rights to having rights, to seeing what's needed. Obviously that everyone has rights because we have constitutions and so on, but and all of these are really being debated in the media. The Constitution is always in the media. What is that? It's people are at this point of discovering they have power, but then being able to be powerful in powerlessness as well. And that is a kind of, it's a gift that you can have when you are reading something that is so destructive. You know, we have had many really atrocious things happen to people that we know recently or that we don't know, but we empathize with. And how do you deal with that when you are so powerless? Can you find some power in that powerlessness? And I think that is also part of what I'm trying to do, is to have the power to face the powerlessness that one does feel from various aspects that are given to us in the media. Corruption, unspeakable things that are done by certain people to other people, which I don't remember in 10 years ago being as awful as they are now. And then, of course, also knowing what's going on the other side of the world, it's like a new threshold that we now have to face not only our own stuff here in our town or in our neighborhood, but now we've got to deal with things that are happening in Japan or somewhere else. And how do you cope? How do you stay sane? And one needs to use these things and to employ them in order that one can find an inner... Willie Benter actually gives 6 steps. I observe the outer world, however I do it. I enter the inner world in solitude. I reflect. I pause on this journey that I'm on. I stop all the outer sensory engagement. Stop doing, and I start reflecting. That is a major beginning of what we're talking about here, is the stopping doing and going into oneself and reflecting, or being in this space of solitude. I embrace the solitude and I live in the solitude of the inner space, the state of mindfulness. I respect the process of creativity of my human beingness. While I'm there, I'm busy reflecting. Animals don't do this. This is part of my creativity. I then translate the experience, the situation, hopefully through integrity or whatever other force inspires me, into a language that can meet the other. So that is where we are now.
And so that last little bit to me is about the communication part. So what we're talking about is having more, if I can label a conscious communication, would be that to observe what, listen to someone else, but then go within, reflect on it, be quiet and still, be with what you've heard or seen. Bring your own forces of, you're saying, like integrity, whatever it is to it, and then...
Because you are going to produce something in words, either written or spoken, to give it back to the outside world. That is what the media is doing. I'm a medium for this thought or for this whatever it is. I do a lot of work with people, with the health providers who work in the rural areas with people who have diabetes, and we have a lot of different people. We go from doctors right down to community health workers, and quite often there are priests amongst them, because they also work with health in the rural areas. And I've often asked people where they have their me time, and they've said, we've never heard of that before. A priest said to me, he's called a pastor, he said to me, when I walk into the veld where all the trees are on my own, I've still got my cell phone with me and my flock They are wanting me all the time. I have never had me time. I don't know what you mean. And now that is someone who is a trained pastor. So this concept of this inner solitude, which for me is second nature, it's not so with everyone. And it's almost like hitting a ball against a wall. It just bounces back at you unless it can go in through this process that Willie Vento spoke about and get transformed through, digested, I should say, digested and made one's own, and then offered back in a new form, hopefully in a more positive form, or at least a useful form.
The progressive kind of form.
Yes.
They're going forward, they're evolving.
That is my hope. That through that I might be able to have because I have a creative faculty, I rely on that. And I also trust it. I rely on it and I trust it because I've, in moments, years later, or I can even remember with Enid Blyton when I read her books, and now when I reflect back on it, I recognize the wisdom and the truth of what she stood for. In a book called The Land of Far Beyond, I used to read that from cover to cover, and when I look back on it now, it encapsulates my whole philosophy. And so I recognize truth when I see it. And it might take years. You don't recognize truth the next day. It needs to be practiced.
So maybe as we start to wrap up then, if we could maybe talk then about if you've got any tips or any suggestions, if I were to learn, want to have more, I call them conscious conversations, so that we can have meaningful conversations that count, in order to practice that ability to see truth and to offer truth. Are there any tips or suggestions that you could give that would help someone like me on that process?
Well, I am a believer in exercise, and I know when we used to, when we had a conversation, we would, or if we watched a conversation, for example, in a group, watch two people having a contentious conversation, which they were asked to do, you actually write down your own reactions to things. And then before you've got time to sanitize them, or and then you actually, and one of the little, it's called a transformation technique. You may take a word like racist, which of course is in so many periodicals at the moment, and I would say in anybody's book, that is not something that anybody wants to cultivate. So we could agree that is an untransformed quality. But nevertheless, it's a reality in people. So the first thing is to say, I have it. Now what do I do with it? And then this is a transformation technique that you can do in a minute. You simply write down the word at the top of a page, fold it over, make up a really gory sentence that encapsulates that word. And then look at what you've made up, what you've created. Choose a word from there that seems to have some kind of lightness in it. And then close that sentence away so you can't see it. Write down a new word. Find a positive way of encapsulating this word. So fold that word down, write the new sentence, which brings a lightness to the middle word now. And then out of that second sentence where you've actually brought some light and life into the process, find a new word and write it down, having closed that sentence. So what you've got is you've got your beginning quality that you wish to transform. You characterize it in the worst way possible. Find some kind of light in word in there. Use that word to bring a new thought, and out of that thought lift out a word. And when I did that, the word was radiance. So I went from racist to the radiance of the other in a minute. And it sounds, someone said, oh well, that's a parlor game, but it isn't. It depends how you use it. It's very, very powerful too.
Very powerful, because that's how I met you in your workshop. We did that, and I was also really felt the difference within me in terms of that process. And as you say, it's very quick but so powerful.
And it can shift a really negative, depressing mood. It can just shift it, and it's got to do with this promising a sense of personal fulfillment and healing that nothing else can when we employ our creative faculties.
In a way of journaling, because it just brings us back to the theme of journalists, because that is for me almost a way of journaling, self-reflection in terms of writing, very creative, and
because you're going from the outside inside, creating, and then you're offering something back out again. And that a journal is a journey. And so a journalist is constantly on this journey to find the truth, one way or the other.
If people would like to get hold of you to find out more about the work you do, and what's the best way?
Well, I have an email. I don't have a website or anything like that. I just have an email address. Will you be putting that on your website?
I'll add it in the show notes. Do you want to say it as well for those that are listening? Or
I can do that. It's Linoya, which is my name. It's LINOIA @ mweb.co.za.
Great.
And I'd just like to thank you very much for recognizing something of value in the work we did together.
Very much, and I'm very grateful for your work, because for me it's really important that we start having more meaningful conversations. I call them conversations that count, and conscious and being aware of how we do communicate, because there's so much that happens between us by how we engage between us. So I find what you're doing very useful and fascinating, really.
Thank you.
Which maybe I need to go and reflect on what that fascination is. So it's maybe then just in a parting message, is that if there's anything you'd like to say to people who are listening in, and that.
I would encourage people to jot down a couple of lines at the end of every day. It really digests the day. You reflect back a little bit on what has happened, and then the day just doesn't go by without any kind of honoring. So I would, not necessarily a long piece, but just a few lines, possibly with a theme. How many people have I met today? Count them up. How many people did I talk to on the phone? How many times did I go out in my car today, or anything? Or just to reflect, why did today happen to me like that? I really would just invite people to get a little journal and and write something every evening before going to sleep.
And can you share a bit about what's so important for you about doing that kind of practice?
Yeah. Well, one thing, it's a record of your life, and you may want to look back 3 years ago when someone was visiting, and you want to know. You can go back there. So in other words, it's a record of your life. And the other one is that it actually honors, it makes each day a really important, because it's the only gift you've got is today, the gift of today. And how do you honor it? When you're running through the day, reflect. In other words, you're crossing back inside. It's practicing. It's the same. You're actually practicing what I've been talking about all along in another way. It's also a medium, printed word.
Yeah. And specifically practicing that reflection of why did today happen to me?
Yes.
Or things like, what did I offer? What did I learn? What did I gain?
Yes.
What happened?
You might want to choose one theme rather than, just like an existential, why did today happen? Because it just might be overwhelming. But it could simply be, what happened at 11 o'clock today for a week? I counted up how many people I met in a particular day or in a particular week. I looked back over the week after doing a little bit every day, and I noticed that it was 54, which is a lot of people. And I wouldn't have thought of that, and every time I thought of it, I thought of another one that I could add, and another one as I went back. So it's recollection is as important as projecting.
Again, example of an exercise of going within.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because people are always setting goals. I'm not a goal setter. So I'm much more interested in what's happened and what is happening now, and I don't really know what's going to happen next. I'm not a goal setter. So it's a kind of opposite to the modern way of having these 7-year goals, and then you get this diary and you've got to write your goal of the day, and I get all nervous when I have to do that sort of thing. So I've also got lots to learn.
We always do. But thank you so much for sharing what you're learning at this moment.
Thank you very much, Telana.
This was Let's Talk Communication with me, Telana. To learn more about the show and my guest, Noy Pullen, please have a look at the website, which is talkcommunication.innercoaching.co.za. Till next time, be real, and thanks for listening.